Every September, something amazing happens in our city. The whole world shows up in Toronto to watch movies. For over 40 years, the Toronto International Film Festival has been one of the biggest and most important film festivals in the entire world. And the reason for its success has a lot to do with our first guest. But with success comes a lot of criticism. Has the festival become too business conscious? Are we too preoccupied with celebrity watching? Well, in just a few moments, we're going to have some answers to those questions, and also maybe we'll find out what it's really like to hang out with the movie stars. Piers Hanley joins us tonight, the CEO and director of the Toronto International Film Festival. I'm Thom Ernst, and this is Making Movies, the Canadian way. Thank you very much. Piers, I'm doing great. Our guest, Piers Hanley. I can't believe this moment has happened. I get to sit down and chat with Piers Hanley. I've been going to the film festival. 1985 was my first year going consistently. The Big Chill, I think, was the big movie that year. Am I right?
85, you're pretty close, actually.
If not right
around that time.
Yeah.
Good year, actually. It was a really good year. Big Chill was one of the most important films we had at the festival. Sort of broke the ice in all kinds of ways, but we can talk about that in a second, Tom.
Well, let's talk about that now.
Sure.
How did it break the ice? I mean, when I look back, then I thought The Big Chill, I'm not going to be a film critic right now, but then I thought The Big Chill was fantastic. Now I look at The Big Chill and I go,
It's aged a bit, hasn't it?
It's aged a bit, yeah.
Well, in the early days of the festival, it was hard to actually get some of the big films. And of course, year one of the festival, it was almost impossible to get big stars. And the festival was criticized heavily in the press for announcing all these films, et cetera, and hoping that the stars would come, and nobody actually came. I don't think anyone came in year one. And slowly over the years, a few people did come. The Fonts came, I think, year two. And then The Big Chill was the breakthrough year, actually. It really was. We'd had a couple of big films before. Chariots of Fire, I think, was one of the key ones. I really remember that. Went on to win Best Picture Oscar, but I don't think the cast came for that. And I wasn't actually working for the festival in those days. The Big Chill I do remember, though, because I was at the festival. It was one of those evenings. It was a surprise. It was the world premiere. And of course, you had this extraordinary cast of people who came who were going to go on to become huge movie stars. So that sent a big signal to people in subsequent years. I mean, it was just a breakthrough film. It really was. One of the key films. And you sort of go through the history of the festival. People often ask me this question, so what were the breakthrough years? What were the breakthrough films? It's always hard to say because it was a series of, you built it year by year, obviously. But when you do look back, I think Big Chill was one of the key films. American Beauty was another one, many, many years later. Lots in between, but yeah, Big Chill. It was a good year. It's what got me to move to Toronto. Don't know if you could thank the festival for that or not, but back in my hometown, it was the front page. All these actors were in Toronto. Next year, I was up there at the film festival. I mean, you have brought. Most recently, I think it's been announced that the festival has brought 100. Well, I phoned your staff and I said, "Is it true that you guys brought in $8 million?" And they got back to me. They said, "Well, it's $189 million." And I knew there was an 8 in there somewhere. $189 million into the city. I imagine you or Cameron show up at the mayor's office. Immediately, it's please sit in my seat, put your feet up on the table, I'll go get you some lunch. I mean, do they worship you at City Hall? Well, they're really very friendly. I mean, all mayors have been, actually. They've been very supportive over the years. And the present mayor is extremely supportive of the arts in general, but also the festival in particular. John led the end of our capital campaign. He was the final person that closed the capital campaign. We were raising all the money for the building, which is a $200 million project.
Yeah.
So John and the Tory family have been phenomenal supporters of the organization. So yeah, when we do go by, I mean, you don't get everything you want, to be honest, Tom. But I was just at a session a couple of weeks ago. Toronto Board of Trade ran something, and the mayor showed up, and the provincial minister of culture showed up as well, culture and tourism, and it was all about TIFF and all about the business opportunities that it brought to the city. So they're very aware, the city's very aware, and things like street closures on King Street, which is one of the key things that we've instituted over the last couple of years. I mean, it's a great initiative. But yeah, there's some challenges there as well. The TTC obviously have challenges, so it's not a completely smooth street. But generally, the city's been amazing, totally supportive.
You know, the street closure really made up for the loss of the Young Street and going from one theater to another. There was a feeling that happened with that and with the festival. Yeah. And suddenly with the street closure, it's back again.
Yeah, I mean, when you start out, of course, you're a small festival and it's easy to remain concentrated. And we were up at Yorkville for so many years and it was fantastic. I mean, I remember those days really well. And it just, you kind of felt that the neighborhood Yorkville owned the festival, and people were shopping and people were sitting in the outdoor restaurants and stars were walking by, and the Four Seasons. It had that kind of clubby feel. It was small. And the festival started to sprawl, started to grow, started to get bigger, and the Sutton Place Hotel, and then we moved, we had the galas down at Roy Thompson Hall, so it got a little separated. And now, of course, we've kind of pulled it all back together. We really do we have our own home now. We have a whole bunch of host hotels around us, next door to us, our host hotel, and the Ritz-Carlton, the Shangri-La, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah. So we're at the Princess of Wales with Roy Thompson Hall. So you kind of get that sense of festival atmosphere. Closing off the street was just a natural development, it really was. Streetcars are there, but we have red carpets outside Princess of Wales. So it was kind of a safety thing as well as, no, let's actually start owning the streets. And it worked really well. I mean, it was fantastic. Weather last year wasn't so great, kind of put a little bit of a damper on things, but the year before it was fabulous. And even last year it worked very well.
Yeah, I mean, even with the weather, I think it worked wonderfully. There's something about seeing a red carpet that just sort of draws people in, and I think it works on the imagination too.
It does, and of course the people that actually walk down that red carpet, I mean, I remember the evening that Bill Murray was there. It was kind of Bill Murray Day.
Yes, I remember.
2 years ago. And actually it did pour that day as well. But it was just, phenomenal, a number of people who were outside. We've had Benedict Cumberbatch. He was there, Eddie Redmayne. So, some of the key Oscar winners have walked that red carpet, have been there. I mean, huge profile guests. So it is exciting. Red carpets are what, a lot of people associate with the festival. The festival is much more than that in my mind. You actually scratch below the surface and there's a whole bunch of other things going on. But of course the profile, the international profile, the reason that media from around the world come and the people pay attention, and we've got so many readers and awareness in Toronto is of course because of the red carpet stars. I mean, we're now known for breaking Oscar movies. Mm-hmm. You look at this year's Oscars, we had Spotlight, it was one of the big films. Clearly we had Room, which went on to win a bunch of awards as well. So we did very, very well by the films we had in the Oscars this year. Danish Girl we had as well. So we've now got that reputation, and of course that actually adds to the excitement of the city. They really do. They expect to see major movie stars.
Yeah, and not only that, if it wins People's Choice Awards, good chance it could win an Oscar.
So we had an amazing track record, starting from American Beauty, which won the Audience Award and then won on to Best Picture. We had a funny run of about I don't know how many films. From Crash to King's Speech to 12 Years a Slave, all won the Audience Prize and then went on to win Best Picture Oscar. Argo, I think, finished number 2 in the balloting this year. I can't remember. Room won, of course, won the most popular. Didn't win Best Picture, but it was, was in the running at the end. So it's not all about the Oscars, but you know that you're a significant player.
You know what, I've always been fascinated how when it comes to the awards ceremony at the film festival is so big and so exciting, and you could actually even add the word glamour to it because it does provide at least, the glamour of seeing the stars and seeing a new movie for the first time, maybe a new director. And then it comes to the awards and it's very simple. It's a very simple award ceremony. Are you okay with me saying that? It's very relaxed.
In fact, what I love about the festival is it's very relaxed. It has a kind of relaxed, down-home feel atmosphere. It's not like I go to a lot of the other major festivals in the world. And it's not as Tony, upscale, snobby as Cannes is. Obviously, Cannes is very, you have to wear black tie to go to the evening screenings, the gala screenings. So it has a very different kind of, the actual screenings, black tie, there's a kind of a dress code. If you don't actually wear black tie, you can be turned away from the screening if you're not dressed appropriately. Last year the scandal was women who weren't wearing heels were not allowed into the screenings. So, Cannes actually changed the policy halfway through, but it was kind of crazy. But they do have fashion police at the top of the stairs of the red carpet in Cannes. Toronto's not about that at all. No black tie stuff. I mean, I wear black tie on opening night, but I'm about the only one. The rest of it is just, it's movie going, the general movie going public. So the awards ceremony at the end, you want that, you want it mirrored there. It really is about the people of Toronto owning the festival, feeling that they, belong there. And of course, you don't want to make it a dressy event.
No. I mean, if I don't want to belittle my colleagues, but if there is fashion police at the screenings, how many Toronto film critics actually can get in? I've seen them.
Well, I've seen some critics actually get in, but that's another story.
Yeah. Okay. Okay, now let's just assume, and this is not a spiritual show, but let's just assume we only have one life to live. How is it living that life as the CEO of one of the biggest festivals in the world?
Well, it's been a great surprise, actually, more than anything else. I never thought I was going to end up in this job. My career path was very, very different. When I went to university, I was history and philosophy. I fell in love with film when I was at university, but I was much more academically oriented, to be honest. Started my life as a critic, was writing kind of serious, not daily reviews. I was much more interested in long-form criticism. I started to write books, started to do some very serious research in Canadian cinema. I taught at Queen's and Carleton for 3 years. I was kind of an associate professor, lecturer. And then, so I was much more in that kind of career path, much more serious, and not the show busy side at all. So I kind of fell into this, partially because my closest friend actually happened to be the director of the festival. And when I needed a job at a certain point in my career, I left a job. I just phoned Wayne Clarkson up at that point in time and said, I was living in Ottawa, here was Toronto, there weren't a lot of film jobs. I just phoned Wayne and said, have you got anything? And so he sent me to Rio de Janeiro for 2 weeks to select 18 films. It was a World Cup year, it was amazing. I had a phenomenal blast in Rio. But it was the kind of thing where I really enjoyed programming, and I wanted to connect the critical side of my thinking with reaching an audience. That was very important. So you weren't just sort of ivory tower writing away for small groups of students. I loved all that stuff, but I actually wanted to have more of a public impact. So the festival was actually perfect in that kind of way. But to be honest, I became the artistic director of the festival, and that was very comfortable for me. I didn't want to deal with boards of directors and deal with fundraising. The whole public side of the festival, going out there schmoozing and being on stage and, just being the public face. I was kind of happy being the number two. So when the opportunity came up, I thought about it very seriously. I mean, it wasn't a big decision, to be honest. I mean, I felt I'd been groomed pretty well. But it was one of those things where doors sort of strangely opened in my career. And I didn't aspire to have this job, didn't aspire to be the director or the CEO of the festival, far from it. It just sort of happened, and then you felt very comfortable within the role once you got into it. So it's a phenomenal job. It's maybe one of the best film jobs in the world, I think. And of course, now that the festival and TIFF, the year-round institution, has grown into what it is, it's exhilarating. I mean, it really is. To have a vision of what you want to do with your life. And for me, it was quite simple. I wanted to be engaged with the arts. I wanted to be engaged with film, which I loved, and I wanted to be engaged with the people who were making those films. I wasn't quite sure if I was going to become a filmmaker myself, but I loved dealing with the creative side, with the filmmakers and shaping and thinking, and of course engaging with them. That was very important to me. The festival allows me all those opportunities. I mean, over the years, just the impact that I've had on and working with people's careers has been significant. It really has, and that's incredibly rewarding to have grown up at the same time as filmmakers like David Cronenberg, Adam Agoyan, Deepa Mehta, Bruce McDonald, Peter Metley, the Toronto group of filmmakers, Patricia Rozema, to have seen them emerge as short filmmakers and then see them move on to the international stage, as well, of course, the international filmmakers I met over the years. And that is, my great love was foreign cinema. I grew up outside of the country. Had many, all my high school years were spent outside of the country. I loved foreign cinema. Grew up in Europe. I lived in Asia for a bit. So I had that, fascination with subtitled foreign language cinema. I really did. I probably privileged that, to be honest, over English language cinema at a certain point. I was really intrigued by what they were doing with their cinema. It was so different. That's what engaged me. That's what kind of caught me. Very different ways of using film. And of course, we all grow up with entertainment cinema. We all grow up with Hollywood. I did, as well as everybody else. And that didn't really capture my imagination. My imagination was captured by filmmakers from Europe in particular, France, Italy, and filmmakers from India who, were using cinema in extremely different ways. And that's probably why I'm in this job.
Well, and then it becomes this phenomena that we see now, where the merging of Hollywood cinema, which some of these foreign cinema styles, like movies by Jim Jarmusch, I would think is influenced by European style, and
Well, that was the great thing, exactly. I mean, I think the generation that I grew up with, and I'm a child of the 60s, I think that generation in the States, in Australia, in England, you know, all the English language countries, even in Canada, I mean, they looked to the most exciting cinemas that were being done, most exciting filmmakers. Where were they emerging from? They were coming from France, they were coming from Italy, they were coming from Sweden at that point in time in the 60s. You know, it was the Bergmans, the Fellinis, the Antonionis, the Godards, the Truffauts, you know, the gods of cinema at that point in time. And of course, they imitated, they reflected, they imbibed that work. And, you know, so Jim, you know, is a kind of American, European art house filmmaker in all kinds of ways. You know, Jim's made films around the world with European money, with Asian money. So he's really a filmmaker of the world. He's an international filmmaker. And I admire that. You know, there's other filmmakers as well, European filmmakers who've looked to American cinema and taken some of the good things from American cinema. You know, people like Wim Wenders and Aki Kaurismäki have looked to some of the great American filmmakers like Nicholas Ray, Sam Fuller, you know, some of the old guys from the 50s, and incorporated their filmmaking, Hawks, Ford, Hitchcock, into the way they've viewed cinema. So it's the great thing about cinema is it's so transnational, multinational, however, it's international. I mean, people, it's phenomenal. I mean, it's very easy to see films. It's easier to see films than it probably is to, you know, buy books or you know, go to plays or see other art forms. It's one of those, it's just around you. You imbibe it all the time. So you can see films from around the world. And I think that generation was hungry for options, hungry for different ways of looking at the world.
I do think it's first of all, I just want to point out my first question about what's it like to live in your life as the head of one of the biggest film festivals in the world. The fact that you call Jim Jarmusch Jim is a prime example of what I'm talking about. I mean, all of a sudden a phone call, and the phone rings, you pick it up, it's Quentin Tarantino, or better still, you call him. He says, of course I'll take that call. I mean, you go to the backstage, it's Salma Hayek. I mean, this is a different world than I think many of us are used to. You began, as you said, in someplace else, but now you're in this world that to some people it's not imaginable, you know?
It was really, yeah, as I said, it was a kind of a slow move into it. And the festival was very small when I joined.
Well, how small was it at the beginning?
It was pretty tiny, actually. I mean, I joined year 7. I've only missed 2 festivals. I used to go to the festival as public. But when I joined, there were maybe 5 full-time staff. It was contract staff of maybe about 40 or 50. And of course, we were on contracts, myself included. You're on contract for maybe 3 or 4 months, and then your contract was over. That was it. You kind of, you know, had to find other contracts. But the full-time staff was about 5 people. We were in an office, you know, about the size of this studio, full-time. And then, of course, it grew a little bit to actually produce the festival. You know, now it's 200 full-time employees. You got another 1,000 people on the payroll to actually produce the festival, and 2,500, 3,000 volunteers. So it's a machine now. It really is really big. But you're right. So, you know, in the early days, it was, you know, you were working with the studios. You were certainly beginning to get calls from, I guess, you know, famous people. But as the festival has grown over the years, I mean, the importance of it now is people want to be here. Most filmmakers want to be here. So, you know, every once in a while you will get a phone call from somebody, you know, who, you know, it's kind of like a surprise. Sean Penn's on the line, you know, and I'm a great admirer of him, by the way, as a filmmaker, not just as an actor.
Yeah.
So it's, you know, because Sean's a very serious filmmaker. So you're supporting his career not just as an actor, but also as a filmmaker. So, but the amazing and exhilarating part of the job for me was I could be in one day on the phone to virtually every single part of the globe. You know, you were talking to filmmakers in Russia, or, you know, sales agents, distributors. You were talking to them in Italy, you were talking to them in Africa, you were talking to them in Australia, you were talking to LA all the time, New York. So you had this kind of, you were plugged in globally, and that was really fun and exhilarating to a lot of very interesting people. And it wasn't just transactional. You know, with some people, you develop relationships over the years, and of course you talk film, you talk cinema.
Yeah.
You know, what did you see? What have you liked? What's going on? So you had this kind of sense of antenna everywhere, but it was also very current. And the great thing, you know, where I started in cinema and where I started my own career was I loved research, I loved history, I loved the past. And this was not about that at all. This was all about being in the moment, being, you know, in the present, and to a certain extent in the future, what was going to happen. And it was like shaping a machine like the festival is pretty amazing. It's pretty exhilarating to be able to sort of say yes, no, to make decisions around, we're going to choose this director this year as the spotlight, this national cinema, we're going to do these kinds of things in terms of the programming, we're going to put the focus here. That is all very, very exhilarating, kind of fun. And then it expanded into not just the festival. You were shaping a building, shaping the programming that went into a building, shaping year-round stuff. Educational activities, archiving, all the things that I kind of came out of. So the festival has just allowed me to touch a lot of interests. And a lot of interests. So it's not just the 10 days of the event at all. I mean, I can really go deep. I can go into, deep into retrospective programming, more serious stuff, indulge my appetite for that, keep my fingers in a whole bunch of different pies, and that's been really, really fun.
We talked about the importance of what this has been for Toronto, and obviously $189 million. I mean, that's more than this set cost. But it's also important to young, upcoming filmmakers. You talked about the Adam McGoyans, David Cronenberg's doing shorts. Jeremy Podeswa certain has films that premiered there. Now we got, I would never have seen Sleeping Giant, I don't think, if it wasn't for TIFF, which is a phenomenal film. And how important is this film festival for young filmmakers living in Toronto, wanting to be part of the industry, wanting their films to be seen?
It's crucial. I mean, I'll add some names to that. Michael Moore, Jim Jarmusch, Spike Lee, Steven Soderbergh. I mean, you can kind of go on and on, even the younger generation. It's for them, I think festivals were the key. It was their point of access to awareness. It really was. I mean, every single one of the filmmakers I've mentioned, and many, many more.
Tarantino?
Quentin, absolutely. Were discovered at festivals. That's where they came out of. Some of it was Toronto, some of it was Cannes, some of it was Sundance. But they got their break in festivals as young filmmakers with their first feature films. In some cases, short films, but most of those directors with features. And it provides a platform. I mean, it provides instant exposure to the media, instant exposure to opinion makers, instant exposure to the industry, the buyers in particular. And for them, it was crucial. I mean, I've known filmmakers who've come into this festival, first-time filmmakers who've come to this festival with no reputation at all, like none. Nobody ever, they don't know their name. American, European, from around the world. 10 days later, suddenly everyone's aware of them. They are, the sort of the buzz name. And you can make a breaker film. I've seen the opposite happen as well. Filmmakers come in with all kinds of expectations and their film doesn't work. Sometimes the film is dead on arrival, and sometimes it goes on to a healthy career, but you don't sort of break through. So it's exhilarating and exciting when you do break through. I mean, there's very few of them that actually do. Ingrid Venegar, who was one of your previous guests. I mean, for Ingrid, it's been a long, slow build. Even for Adam McGoyan, it was not instant fame. Patricia Rozema, quite different. Patricia went to Cannes with her first film. Patricia just exploded like that, to Cannes. So every career is different. David Cronenberg, another perfect example. David started in a very, very, very slow burn mode, and then went into commercial filmmaking, genre filmmaking, before he was discovered by festivals. And David is now a staple of festivals. But I think now the world has really changed. The film industry has changed too, and festivals are crucial for exposure. And I think every filmmaker, especially independent filmmakers, are looking for an edge. They're looking for a leg up. They're looking for an advantage. You're competing in the commercial marketplace against Hollywood that can afford marketing and publicity budgets of anywhere between 50 to 150 million, $200 million. Right, yeah. How can you compete as an independent filmmaker who's made a film for maybe $1 million, $2, $3 million? I mean, your marketing and PR budget is absolutely infinitesimal if you even have one, if you're lucky enough to have one. You may not even have a distributor. So they're looking for that moment where there's a platform that you can be launched into the marketplace. Festivals provide that. They are massive press junkets. We have over 1,000 press coming. Cannes is really a festival for the press. There's about 5,000 or 6,000 press registered in Cannes. We have about 5,000 industry in total coming to Toronto, buyers, sellers, producers, agents. So the networking that happens, your film may be bought and sold, but there's also networking. I mean, the number of people that are signed up by agents for North America or whatever, because everyone's looking for talent. The talent hunt is amazing, competitive. So you can come out of a festival with a distribution deal. You've met a producer. You've maybe met other actors. You met a scriptwriter. Deals happen. You met other people who are going to be a part of your future. And it's a very intense, I mean, it's a 10-day event, but for a lot of festivals, it all happens in about 5 or 6 days. You got 5,000 or 6,000 people milling around the hotels here. It's a phenomenal opportunity to meet, network, and the number of projects that actually happen at festivals, number of famous projects that they start here in Toronto. They had a breakfast with the scriptwriter, they had a breakfast with the producer. It happened in Toronto. It happens in, of course, the other festivals as well, the big ones. I would say there's probably 5 big festivals that actually have this kind of power and impact in the world, and Toronto happens to be one of them, which is great.
And where does Toronto fit in there? I mean, I think third, but is it? Yeah, no, okay, a little higher.
It'll be interesting. I think we're probably number 2, and I think a lot of people think we're equal number 1. I mean, it depends. It's very difficult to rate festivals and rank festivals, to be honest, because there's so many different agendas. I think for the North American market, for the North American industry, Toronto is probably seen as the number 1 festival in the world. For the European festival or the European market, it's Cannes.
Yeah.
But it really does depend. And Sundance has a great reputation, but it really is all about American independent cinema. Doesn't really run American or international cinema. So it's very hard to rate festivals, but I would say we're probably in the top 2. That's where I place
and
it.
certainly that's got, from that small festival in Yorkville, not in Yorkdale, that would have been awful.
Right, yeah. We may not have been noticed.
No, I don't think so.
Yeah.
And to the way you are now, I mean, it's got to be overwhelming. But as you say, you sort of grew up with it slowly, so you became accustomed to it. It just became part of you.
Yeah, when you're in it, you don't notice its growth in quite the same way.
Yeah.
People tell you about it more than you notice it.
Yeah.
I mean, I think if I stepped out of it and was gone for about 4 years, 5 years, and came back to it, then you say, oh yeah, it's kind of grown up. It really
don't
has.
do that.
Yeah, I hope not.
Yeah.
Not for a bit, anyway.
I could remember one part of the festival that's exciting for me. Well, first of all, everyone becomes an expert in movies during those 10 days.
Isn't that
great?
great? Everyone talks to each other. That's what I love,
Yeah.
the social part of it. You're absolutely right. I mean, people love going out and mingling with other Torontonians and talking about films and what did you see and who have you seen and what film should I see and all that kind of stuff. It's a great social networking opportunity. Community engagement.
The buzz for a film.
The buzz is fantastic.
Yeah. And like with Slumdog Millionaire, I mean, it became the movie you had to see. And then there was a few others, like a director, when The Wrestler came out, everyone had to see that film. Little story for you. Norman Jewison's at the end of the line to get into The Wrestler. Did I tell you this one?
No.
Norman Jewison's at the end of the line to see The Wrestler. I see him on his cell phone. They're turning people away. He's telling his friend on the phone, whoever that is, I won't be able to get in. Let's go meet for a burger or something. So I catch up to him and I said, Norman, you're Norman Jewison. Why don't you go up to the front and tell them I'm Norman Jewison? He said, I am Norman Jewison, but I'm also Canadian.
See, exactly. No, very true. Toronto has this kind of democratic sense of itself, which is fantastic. Everyone lines up. There's no real privileged access. So, no, it's great to hear that from Norman. Norman's actually imbibed the vibes of what Toronto is as a festival. I mean, he used to be on our board, by the way. So,
yes.
Yeah. So Norman kind of recognized that, which is great to hear. I have walked a few people into the cinemas, though, in the past. I've kind of grabbed them out of lines. I recognized them like you and sort of said, okay, I can get you in, follow me. Let's go the back route.
I can't wait till you do that, and I hope you do that in front of all my friends. Okay, so now I've just talked about some of my own experiences, like seeing Reservoir Dogs for the first time, not knowing who Tarantino was, not even knowing what this movie was going to be like. The idea of seeing something for the first time, something, not just a movie that no one has seen before, but a movie that has not even been made before, like it just seems out of nowhere. Slumdog Millionaire, Reservoir Dogs, No Country for Old Men. I just remember seeing these films and saying nothing like this ever before. Sadly, I think I've mentioned all sort of British or American films. There's certainly a lot of foreign films that fall into that, but isn't that really what a festival does too?
It does. I mean, that sense of discovery, of finding something for the first time is unique. And we have so many world premieres, so many premieres in the festival. The guests, the filmmakers are there, and often the stars are there, so that adds to the excitement.
Yeah.
But that when you hear a standing ovation, when people kind of rise to their feet, and it's just like they feel they own this film, when that happens, it's quite something. I mean, you're making magic happen. You're obviously making the filmmakers, the cast, all of them are really, really happy. It's exhilarating as a festival organizer, as a programmer, to see that kind of that connection. I think that's what drives you. I mean, there's hours and hours of work. I mean, it really is. It's a tough job. It's you travel all over the world. You're seeing films over the course of the summer. I mean, I haven't had a summer since I've been working for the festival, which is now over 30 years. Like literally from May through to September, all your weekends, you're screening late into the night. There's great parts of the job, and I don't want to say it's a miserable job, far from it, but you're in the trenches. So to actually come out of it, at the end, it's like running a marathon. You are beat up. There's all kinds of negotiations over the course of a summer. There's tough moments as well as exhilarating moments. So when you kind of arrive at the festival in September, you are very tired. You go through the 10 days, which is really exhausting. You end up at the end of it, you take a break, you sleep for a week. So to go through those public moments, which is what it's all about at the end of the day, the connection with the public, where you put that film on screen, and you do feel an ownership of it. You've seen this film, I remember seeing a film like Ida, which went on to win talking about a Polish film, talking about non-English language films. I saw Ida when I was in Warsaw, screening room all by myself, thought it was fantastic. I knew the director quite well, we'd run his earlier works, but I just loved the film. And you have no idea what its future is going to be. It went on to win the Oscar for Best Foreign Language Film, which is terrific. So you feel you found it, the director, you bring it back here, you shaped its future in a kind of way. Yeah. You've intervened in that process. And that's really meaningful as a programmer, as an organizer, festival organizer, that you've had an impact on their career. So that's where the rewards come, actually.
You once told me this incredible story, and I hope you'll tell it again, about Krzysztof Kieślowski. Is that?
Kieślowski?
Kieślowski, yes, thank you. Not that I ever would have pronounced it correctly. About the Decalogue fame. Yes. And you told this wonderful story, a very humble man who made 10 very good films, which in anybody's career is phenomenal. Walking into an audience thinking that there might be thinking that there might be a handful of people in the audience. And do you remember what you told me? Do you remember what happened?
I do. I mean, this was, a big part of my festival memory, because Krzysztof was a Pole who didn't have any North American reputation at all. And over the course of the 10 days of the festival, we did a retrospective of all of Krzysztof's films. And he came here unknown. It was funny, at the press conference where I got to announce the names. We do this program every year of new directors, basically, directors that we were trying to unveil for North America. And I was always really, really happy when the North Americans, the Toronto press, had never heard the name of the director. Because we found some pretty good ones, actually. The first year we did Almodovar, Pedro Almodovar, who went on to become a superstar. And I think year 3, year 4 was Kieślowski, Polish filmmaker, and announced the name, and people scratched their heads and all that kind of stuff. Who in the hell is he? And Krzysztof had made this wonderful, he made feature films, but he had this huge project to actually adapt the 10 Commandments, yawn, yawn, into 10 short films, hour-long films. And of course, it wasn't the sword and sandal films that I'd grown up with as a kid, 10 Commandments, the Bible, Ben-Hur, et cetera, et cetera. This was a modern updating of the 10 Commandments. In fact, you'd have to be told that they were about the 10 Commandments going into the screenings to actually recognize them. They were really about the moral dilemmas at the core of the commandments. Thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not whatever, covet thy neighbor's wife. So he took these ideas and updated them. 10 films, each one an hour, and we ran them at the festival one a day, because we had 10 days of the festival. And I'll never forget, because the first day, we ran it in a big cinema, the old showcase, about 500 seats. First day, maybe 100 people. Second day, 150. By the middle of the festival, we were selling the program out. The word of mouth traveled very, very quickly. I mean, these are the films you had to see. And you talk about word of mouth, this is what the festival's all about, especially in those days. It was about, what should I see, what have you seen? And the very last day, he was about to fly back to Warsaw, and I took him to a screening of one of these films, and it was the showcase. We walked in, the place was jammed. I mean, there was a lineup outside, and talking about people outside, there were some pretty prominent film critics, Martin Ellman being one of them, tugging at my, can I get in? So Martin was one of those guys that I did walk in. But when we walked into the cinema, there was a spontaneous standing ovation when they saw Krzysztof. Everyone just rose to this, And this was a filmmaker that 10 days before, no one knew. They hadn't seen the work, and no one knew his name. So suddenly you realized in a 10-day period you had changed his career when it came to North America. It wasn't just Toronto audiences that found him, because there were critics from all over North America, and the Decalogue, which was an extraordinary group of films, went on to become this phenomenon. I mean, everyone was wanting these films. Every festival in the world was trying to get them. Another story that I could go into in terms of who controlled the films, how we got the Decalogue. Crazy, some of the backstories are really, really interesting. In fact, they're probably as interesting as getting the films themselves. But crazy distributor in Montreal who didn't want the film shown thought she could make all kinds of money on the back of them. So she kind of froze the films after our screenings. Drove Christoph crazy. The films didn't go out in the way that he wanted them to go out. So it was kind of, a very, very strange experience for Christoph. He went on to become a very internationally known director after this. He did the Three Colors trilogy, blue, red, and white.
Yes.
But it was just, it was amazing to see that happen. I mean, you talked about Tarantino, and I remember when Quentin came to the festival, his film had actually been at Sundance, which is where I saw it, where it was discovered. But he kind of came here, and Sundance in those days was a very kind of small festival. It didn't have quite the same amplification it does now. So Quentin's, his film was really kind of, again, found here in Toronto. And it was great because he was one of those guys. I mean, the anecdotal stories about Quentin was he was a total cinephile. And most directors, when they come to the festival, we can afford to pay for, I don't know what the policy was, in those days it was probably 4 or 5 nights. Quentin wanted to stay for the entire festival. So you kind of get a knock on your door and somebody from the guest office would say, Quentin wants to stay for another 5 nights, can we pay for it? And you sort of say, you scratch your head, well, maybe we could, maybe we couldn't. In some cases you said no. For him, we said absolutely. So he went to see films. And then, at the end of every festival, we have a staff party. And it's the staff that go to the staff parties. And now it's really tight. We actually allow nobody else. Quentin wanted to come to the staff party. So he kind of came and partied. I mean, he was just one of those lunatic guys who loved the stuff, loved everything. And he just, hung around the festival. Other filmmakers too. I remember Aki Kaurismäki, Finnish filmmaker. Mm-hmm. And those, in the old days, I would have a fridge with beer in it. And Aki would come in, Finnish, serious drinker. 9 o'clock in the morning, come in for his beer, open the fridge, have his beer, sit down, have a chat. The informal days of the early days of the festival were really, really fun.
Oh, sure. I talked to Monty Hellman at the festival. 10 a.m.
One of my heroes, by the way.
Yeah, 10 a.m. interview, and he said, if you want this to go well, you'll have a Bloody Mary here. And in fact, we did. And it did go well. Are we talking about this period here, if I can get that camera on? That's
yeah, that was the awards ceremony, actually.
There's Quentin with Helga
with
and
Helga
you.
in the middle,
Yes.
A very young-looking me. I can't remember who the other 2 people are, 3 people, but yeah.
So
no, it was fun. I mean, that kind of gives you a sense. That was the award show. It gives you a sense of the early days of the festival. We kind of did it in a small room, and it was fun and relaxed and very laid back.
Quentin looks like he is your caterer in this picture. But there is and when Roger and Me came out too, you talked about Michael Moore and breaking that.
Yeah. Other fun stories with Michael. Yeah.
Did I say Roger Moore? Roger and Me, Michael Moore. Okay.
It was Michael Moore.
Yeah.
Michael sent his film in, which doesn't happen much anymore. He just sent his film in to us unannounced. But in those days, that's what would happen. You just, submissions would come in. In those days, it was film prints. I think it might have been videotape, actually. Sent probably a videotape of Roger and Me. But Michael was really smart. He phoned the guy who actually handled submissions and started to pitch him. And turned him into his friend. And Michael has, if you've seen him in action, of course, he's a charmer. He really is good at talking to people. So guys in print traffic get phone calls like this all the time. And it's very, again, transactional. With Michael, they started a phone conversation, a phone relationship. Michael kept phoning. And so after a few weeks, I started to hear from the head of print traffic. There was this cool guy, this weird guy, promising if we ran the movie, he was going to deliver all these people from Flint, Michigan. He was going to bring his dog up. He was going to bring his car. It was kind of these wacky stories. And Michael just knew how to sow word of mouth before you actually saw the film. So everybody in the office became aware of that film before we'd even seen it, to be honest. And even the people in the office who hadn't seen the film were all aware of Michael Moore before he arrived. And it's funny, because there's filmmakers early in their career that get singled out that way. Not all of them are like Michael. Some of them are very, very different. Each one of them has a different kind of approach. I mean, Quentin was a charmer in a different kind of way. But the ones that know how to sell themselves, have an edge up, a leg up. And he was one of those guys that just knew how to talk to people. And the story became myth here. It arrived in Toronto. We actually ran it in a really small cinema. We arrived at the cinema with thousands of people lined up outside. This was the day before single tickets. You just decided to go to whatever film you wanted to go to. And we realized we run the film in a house that was far too small. It was actually the basement of the Royal Ontario Museum. Okay. And suddenly we realized we had a hit in our hand. And of course the film came out of Toronto with a huge distribution deal. The studio bought it, Warner Brothers, $7.5 million or whatever. And that was it. Michael was sort of set for life. And it was because of a festival screening.
And right after that, because I thought I was at that screening you were talking about, I wasn't. I was at, you got to see this press screening. Suddenly the festival threw together a press screening for this movie. I don't think it was done before or since. That it was sort of...
in those days, I mean, it happens a little bit now. It happens in a different kind of way. It's less visible. In those days, you just you reacted to the moment. And you said, yeah, right, there's a lot of demand for this film. Let's put it on another screening. Let's add another screening. The festival was pretty flexible that way.
Yeah.
Now it all happens behind the scenes in private screening rooms and stuff like that. And the buyers get to see it.
Yeah.
Those days was much more public.
Yeah, and that was another film I just thought I've not seen anything like that. I mean, even documentary, I don't think many people knew that documentary could be such fun.
That's true, because everyone was really focused in those days on fiction films.
Yeah.
Those are the breakout pictures, and of course it wasn't documentaries. Michael changed that. He really did.
I was at CIUT Radio. I had an interview with him, Michael Moore, and the Journal, CBC, the Journal was there, and they said, we're international, and he said, I'm sorry, I promised this guy the interview. And I was CIUT Radio, which is a community radio. I said, do the Journal.
Right.
Yeah, he didn't. Anyway, he's and there's another part of the festival that's become a phenomena. That, of course, is Midnight Madness. It seems to be a festival within a festival. It could be, that started Peter Jackson's career, with Brain Dead and so many others. I mean, this whole, did it start as just
Guillermo del Toro is another good example of a name that broke out of Midnight
Absolutely,
Madness. Guillermo hit it big with a couple of his early midnight films, but Peter Jackson. I can't remember some of the other filmmakers that came out. Some of the Dario Argento, one of the major Italian names.
Yeah.
So it was a fun part of the festival, and I think the programming philosophy of Toronto was to be very inclusive, to do everything.
Yeah.
And the early directors of the festival, Wayne Clarkson, my friend, we loved cinema. We saw everything in those days. We literally did, like every single film that was released commercially, he and I would go and see. So we didn't draw distinctions between high art, low art, foreign language, English language. We were seeing everything. So when the festival was set up, it was, let's touch all the bases. Let's make something for mass public. Let's make something for the crazy, wacky midnight audience, for genre fans, because we love genre films. Let's do something for the art house gang. Let's do something for the experimental. We really wanted to touch all the bases. And Midnight Madness was clearly a program, of course, designed for the wacky 18 to 25-year-old demographic, and that became really important
and
over the years.
57-year-old too, by the way.
And as the festival has aged, that group still goes.
Yeah.
And it's now a cultural event. I mean, it really is. And it's kind of taken off in a way that we never expected. Other festivals copied the initiative. I mean, Sundance is a pretty successful midnight program too, but I think Cannes has a few midnight screenings, but Toronto's really one of the few that breaks serious midnight movies. I think last year, a Russian genre film came out of Midnight Madness. I've forgotten the title, and that did the biggest, distribution deal out of the festival that came out of Midnight Madness. So it's a key part of the festival, and it really is. I mean, festivals always used to have the label of being serious, all about subtitled films, and Toronto always tried to break down those preconceptions, I think. It was actually about having fun, enjoying, talking to the screen, shouting at the screen. You could be very reverential and go in to see art house cinema, the great classic art house names. At the same time, you could go and see cinema that was designed to do something very, very different. And when you know the history of cinema, I mean, guys like Roger Corman, who was one of the great makers of B-movie films, I mean, Corman was the grandfather of so many of the key art house names of American cinema, from Martin Scorsese through to Bob Rafelson through to Jack Nicholson. That's where they all got their breaks. Yeah. Monty Hellman, you know, another guy. Yeah. That's where they started their careers. Jack Nicholson started his career in B movies. So did Marty Scorsese. So it was, you know, Corman had that. He started that. So you can't look down on genre cinema. You really can't, because people have got to practice their art, you know, or their cinema somewhere. David Cronenberg, another perfect example, starting in genre cinema. So you don't know where those genre filmmakers are going to go. And, you know, some of the great filmmakers, I think, in film history come out of genre filmmaking.
Oh, I love genre cinema. Check out Blood in the Snow Festival sometime. They have great genre films there too, from new directors. Thank you so much. Piers, before I go, you know, I really would love to know, and I hope I'm not putting you on the spot, a favorite Canadian film that you would think everyone should see.
So many.
Yeah, it's a tough one to ask.
Yeah, no, it is a tough one. I mean, okay, I'll start with the film that actually got me interested in Canadian cinema. There were two. Am I allowed to?
You're allowed to.
So Going Down the Road, a film made in Toronto in 1970. I'd just come back from 5 years in Germany. In Europe, I'd had all my high school years out of the country. And I saw this film in Kingston. I was going to Queens. And it was amazing. It really was. It was a film all about us. It was a film that celebrated Toronto as a city. Yonge Street, the Strip, the Island. I mean, you know, just the topography of the city was in Going Down the Road. And it was, you know, a story about two newfies coming to the city, big city, and their struggles to get by. I mean, I still love that film. I think it's, you know, one of the classic Canadian films, one of the most important films we ever made in English Canada. I guess the second one was, I love Quebec cinema.
Yes.
Canadian cinema is all about the two cultures. And the second film that really, really kind of turned my crank was a Quebec film called The True Nature of Bernadette, La Vraie Nature de Bernadette, done by a filmmaker called Gilles Carle. Saw it a couple of years later. It was so different than Going Down the Road. It was not about the city. It was actually about the countryside, a farmer, relationship with a woman who'd kind of come from the country, a modern woman who was trying to find her way in the world. And it was kind of so real and so about Quebec and so about its culture, so connected to the land, so connected to the landscape. And, you know, Canada, for me, is all about landscape. It's not about just urban landscapes. It's all about landscape. You know, the land, the people, all that's, you know, so important. And I think those two films, but especially Bernadette, kind of captured a sense of seasons for me, which is also, you know, very Canadian, the four seasons, the colors, the moods. You could kind of smell Canada when you saw that film. So I love both those films for very, very different reasons.
Yeah, and you know what, oddly enough, I've been thinking that Sleeping Giant reminds me very much of Going Down the Road, not in its theme, but in its just the way it's filmed, just the way it's shot, just the way it's presented.
Yeah, it's got a kind of very naturalistic feel about it, I agree.
I love that movie very much. Thank you so much, Piers, for taking the time and joining us. It's been wonderful to chat movies with you.
My pleasure.
And thank you for watching. And if there was a question that I forgot to ask or didn't get a chance to ask, you can write in on the URL that you see on your screen right now, or you could tweet me, which is also on your screen, and I'll be happy to try to get that question answered for you. In the meantime, thank you again, and keep making movies, because it is the Canadian thing to do. Thank you.